council members, park fans, thank you for inviting us up to share a little bit of the story of why we're at this point where we want to end the lease and have a bill of sale for the fishing barge. So I'm going to take you a little bit through the history of the fishing barge and show you a couple pictures. This was actually a picture of a postcard that was given to me on my last visit over to the fishing barge. It kind of shows it in various stages of its history and some of its form or glory. The next set of pictures kind of shows like when it was immediately after it was constructed, and tells some of the stories about once it was opened, how it was a neat place, not only for people in Lewisville, but all over the region. But the pictures also demonstrate how the land in that area and the water surrounding it has changed over time. If you'll remember, during the course of its history, the conservation pool has changed twice. And some of the requirements that the Corps has had in terms of operation and construction of the facility has changed. And just over time, while this has been a great place and there's been great experiences, the structure has kind of outlived its viability. So a little bit of the history. The structure itself, the construction began in 1958, shortly after the city of Lewisville formally had a lease for the Lake Park area. That was shortly, about a year and a half after the dam was constructed. Once the construction of the fishing barge was complete, they started operation in 1959. And the original three members who built the barge sold out to one, Mr. Jago, and he passed that facility down to his family over time. In the 1980s, the city of Lewisville updated our lease for Lake Park, and it included certain areas over in the Tower Bay area and added the Spillway Park to the lease. And at about that time, the fishing barge was sold. And then you'll remember in 2000, the current concession agreement for the barge was executed, and that was with the newest owners and most recent owners, Mr. Poncho Newton and Grady Colomb. At the same time, the city had put in place with the Corps our current lease, which started in 2000, the year 2000, and is scheduled to end in April of 2025. After that, during the course of the years, the Corps passed some rules and regulations and standard operating procedures for how vessels, docks, and marinas needed to be operated and the construction they needed that were required for them on the lake. And a couple of those things included what the flotation devices are on those structures, especially back in the 1950s, it was popular to build flotation structures out of foam blocks. And as time went on and we became more knowledgeable about how that could hurt the environment, the Corps started requiring that those flotation devices, especially those foam blocks, be encased in something, so as they became damaged, those little bits of foam wouldn't go out into the lake. And in 2007, they codified that, but they gave existing structures a grandfather status. So those things could remain in place unless you were doing a significant upgrade or replacing it. In 2019, the Corps said, you know what? People are no longer grandfathered. You have until 2028 to replace all existing foam flotation devices. They also talked of what breakwaters could be. You could no longer have the tires filled with foam or cement as a breakwater. You need to use a more marine grade structure out there. So those things all took place in the course of the history of the lease for the barge. Now that current concession agreement that we have with the fishing bar kind of just mirrors what our lease agreement for the Lake Park area is with the Corps. It went from April of 2000 to April of 2025, and unfortunately the original signatories of that from the fishing bar have since passed away. And there's been issues that we've had as a city with the operators throughout the term. I talked a little bit about the breakwater system not being compliant. There used to be a breakwater system out there. Oops, hold on, sorry, we went past that. Breakwater system out there that was built using old tires filled with foam or cement that we had to ask removed. There's been some work that's had to be done on the anchoring system and access updates that needed to happen in terms of people being able to get to the barge. We've also had some issues with some health inspections out there. You'll see that in the pictures that we showed previously that there used to be a restaurant. It used to be a really great place for people to go out and enjoy out on the lake, but over time, that just became a sore spot there and a place of disrepair, and we've had to address that officially. Now, I will say that once Mr. Newton passed away, there was some immediate improvement that Miss Newton and her daughter made out there. The Corps even commented about how the place had started looking up. But unfortunately, by the time that had happened, there had been such an irreparable damage done to the flotation devices that were still unencased foam, that the structure started sinking down into the water, especially after they removed that breakwater and the conservation pool level was raised. That shoreline's just taken a beating. If you look back at what that shoreline looks different from some of the pictures I've shown you, you'll understand what the action's been against that shoreline and the structure itself. So this being said, as we started looking at the tail end of what our concession agreement needed to be with the fishing barge, but also what the tail end of our lease was with the Corps, and knowing that we have to put a development plan in place to address what new development and upgrades will look like at not only Lake Park, but at the Eagle Point Marina areas, that we needed to address this. So on October 28th of 2021, a hand-delivered note was given to Miss Newton, letting her know that the city did not have the intent to just re-up their lease automatically, that they could be a part of a competitive bid process if they wanted to, and that they could work with whatever developer or be the developer for the fishing barge and Eagle Point Marina if they wanted to. So every year, the city of Lewisville, along with Corps of Engineer team members, do an inspection throughout all of our areas that are leased from the Corps. That includes Lake Park, Eagle Point Marina, Not East Hill Park, and Leela. And we visit together and make sure that all of these areas are meeting not only state and federal and local laws and guidelines, but specifically that we're meeting those out-grant management guidelines, those standard operating procedures that I mentioned that they had put in place in 2007 and 2019. Respectively. And we go out together and city officials make immediate note of what the issues are, and the Corps of Engineers sends us a report of which we have to respond of how we're going to address any deficiencies with that standard operating procedure, those out-grant management policies. Their report typically comes 6 to 9 months after the visit. So, for instance, we had a visit in early 2021, probably March. We got that report in September of what needed to be addressed from that March 21 thing. And it just so happens that the Corps' time for inspection spans from November of one year to March of the next year. So in 2021, we were at the tail end of their early window, and then for their 2021-2022 visit, we were on the early end. So we had two in the same year, and that typically doesn't happen. On October 21st, we got notification that we were going to have an inspection done. Our joint inspection would be done on November 17th. So when I find out that happens, immediately I notify not only our team members with the city of Lewisville, but Eagle Point Marina, the golf course operators, Arcus Golf, and Sneaky Pete's in the fishing barge that will be coming out to inspect these areas. And to make sure that they're ready for these inspections, I remind them of the deficiencies that were identified in the previous inspection and saying, hey, we better make sure that we've addressed these deficiencies so that we're ready for this next inspection. So on November 17th, the city of Lewisville, we had some officials, not only with the Parks and Recreation Department, but building officials and Corps officials visited the set of places out at Lake Park. And I'm going to invite Jeremy Booker up here to tell you a little bit of what we saw from a building inspection standpoint.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Jeremy Booker. I'm the building official over the Building Services Department. I was part of the team that did the inspection on November 17th. And as Stacie mentioned, the structure was built in the 50s, so it's over 70 years old, and it's really surpassed its life cycle. So there's deficiencies in every building component, from mechanical, electrical, structural, accessibility, but our biggest concern was the electrical system. As part of our team, we also had 2 electricians with us, our chief building inspector and our senior electrical inspector, are licensed electricians, and they shared the same concerns. So the electrical system, electricity and water just don't mix. And with the building being built in the 50s, it's outdated. The electrical system's outdated, it has not been maintained. We found evidence that recent electrical work had been done without any permits, without inspections, and did not comply with current codes. It did not meet code for outdoor use. It did not meet code for a wet use, and it didn't meet code for a structure that's located on a body of water. So in the 2 pictures that you're looking at right now, these are taken. It's the same door in both of these pictures, just from slightly different perspectives. But if you look, that floor is completely rotted away. That kind of neon green in the dirty water, that's the lake right there. So, and then on the right-hand picture, you'll see that's their main distribution panel right there. So that's how, if there's an emergency, somebody's getting electrocuted out there, that's where the primary disconnect is for the entire electrical system. And as you can see, it's almost impossible to access that. And if you can, it's dangerous in itself. So the picture on the left, Stacie mentioned there were some issues with anchoring. Their anchoring system is now, they had a steel cable, can't see it very well in the picture, but they had a steel cable tied to that big block, which was not the approved method, and the cable is completely slack in the water. And on the bottom part of that picture, that's their gas line. It's a plastic poly pipe that's not rated for sunlight, not rated for exposure, and it's looped around. It was snaked across the water to the building. Then in the middle picture, you can see that the walkway, that's the main walkway. It's leaning. It's not stable. It's very difficult to maneuver, and it is not ADA compliant. There's just absolutely no way that somebody that was in a wheelchair or had some sort of physical impairment could manage that. And then the right-hand picture, again, a little difficult to see, but there's a corrugated pipe that comes across that water. We believe that's their main plumbing system, best we could determine. So we think there's a holding tank on the structure, and then it connects to a pump. So that's not code compliant by any means. It enters up the side of the hill, and I tried to open it up. It was covered with a piece of drywall, and I tried to open it up, and it started to crumble apart on me, so I could not even inspect it. We also could not determine how they're sourcing the potable water to the building, so we could not find a water line entering the building. There are potential cross connections throughout the building, but between the potable water and the non-potable system. There were multiple places where there was no plumbing traps, so methane gas from that holding tank is entering the building. It was very strong in the bathroom area, but you could smell it throughout. So the methane gas is being introduced into that structure. On the left-hand picture here, that's the rotted floor structure. That was taken in their storage area, kind of back of house storage area. And in that area, we could not safely inspect that entire area, but we did see that there was hazardous material lockers in that area. So we don't know if there was still hazardous materials in those lockers or not, but the floor was so soft, we did not feel safe even walking back there. And then the middle picture again is there's 2 furnaces. There's 2 main furnaces in the closed area. The flexible gas line to both units were severely corroded. They were kinked. We're not sure if there could be leaks in there. One of the vent terminals that are above the roof line was too short, too narrow, so you couldn't get a proper draw. So there's potential that carbon monoxide gas was going to back up into that facility when they turned those furnaces on. And then in the right-hand picture, there's construction debris. You could tell that there was recent construction going on out there. There's no permits, no inspections again. It's blocking some access, it's blocking some means of egress areas. It's just a concern. So after we sent the previous fire marshal sent the notice of evacuation, we had 3 members of our team. It was our chief building inspector, our assistant building official, and then the previous fire marshal went with the representatives with, I believe it's Mrs. Newton's daughter, on the site and said, let them know, look, you have to have engineer plans, you have to get an engineer on site on board with this, and you need permits and you need inspections. On December 10th, I sent a substandard notice. So we shut down the facility primarily because of the electrical system and the means of egress, which is the structural deficiencies, but there's also all the other issues that I mentioned out here. So in that substandard notice, I included all those other deficiencies that need to be repaired before they could really operate fully. So I sent that on December 10th. I gave a 30-day notice. On January 7th, Ms. Newton asked for an extension, and I granted that. I knew that to get an engineer on board, to get a contractor to go out there and investigate everything was going to take time. So I extended that to February 28th. We received a couple of handwritten notices from Mrs. Newton. She had hired some master electricians to visit the site. They were handwritten notes, so they were a little difficult to read and decipher, but essentially said everything's fine out there, or it's either code compliant or it's grandfathered. And we're like, no, that was not what we stated. We said you need permits and you need inspections by city officials. And so as part of that, she had asked for the electricity to be restored. And I forgot to mention that when the fire marshal did first send a notice of evacuation, we pulled the electrical meter. The fire chief contacted TNMP and asked the electrical meter to be pulled. So the site is not currently energized. So Ms. Newton, when she submitted those 2 letters, she asked for the electricity to be turned back on. We stated, no, you're not ready for that. You need to get permits and inspections. Once those pass, then we can turn the power back on. So she asked again for another extension. I granted it to the end of March. And then around March 28th, we reached out to her and said, look, we'd like to meet with you. Where are you on your progress? We would like to give you some options that we've discussed with our staff. And so on April 28th, the city manager, Ms. Powell, Stacie, and I met with Ms. Newton and presented her with those options.
So when we met with Ms. Newton, it was obvious that just the magnitude of what the repairs needed to be and what it would take to get that site just back to what it was prior to the concession agreement. It was beyond what she and her family could handle. So right now, what we've got is the structure remains closed due to structural issues, and they have no intent to repair. They can't. We went out there in June, and it looks like the majority of the fixtures and the content have been removed. You can see they've started removing some of the plumbing materials, and a lot of the lockers that Jeremy referenced were gone, and a lot of the materials and seating, old seating that was left in place is gone. And they've been just slowly and steadily removing some of the stuff. So when we went out in June, we kind of had an idea that this was happening. We'd get to the point that we'd have this release of the concession agreement, and we'd have the bill of sale. So we asked a couple of demolition companies to come walk around the area with us and kind of give a rough order of magnitude and give us some idea of what it would cost. And so if y'all go ahead and approve the settlement agreement, that we release them from their concession agreement, and we have the bill of sale, and we take ownership, we'll give Ms. Newton, she has a couple of items still left on there. We want to make sure she can get those off. and we'll execute it, and we'll start moving in and look at the demolition of the structure. That's about all we've got left to do. And so we'll get some asbestos testing and figure out what those requirements will be for abatement, and we'll issue a request for proposal to identify someone who can come in to remove and demo the barge out there. The rough estimate we got without the asbestos abatement was about $350,000. Now some of that is because we've got to put a skirt around it to make sure that when we're removing the structure, nothing floats out into the water. There's also, in addition to the makeshift anchoring systems back up to the shoreline, there are anchoring systems down into the ground. So we've got to make sure that we get those out as far as we can to a safe manner. There is some rumor that they are large ship anchors from 1930 ships that had been scrapped. So I'm not quite sure if that's true, but we need to work through our way with the Corps of Engineers to approve the demolition and removal plan. But some of the reason that we wanted to tell you the story about the history of the fishing barge is to remind everybody that what's important is those memories that people have out there and those experiences that they've had with their families and their friends, and that's not what we're trying to take away, that this structure right now doesn't provide that, and that we are keen on is when we move forward with the development of Lake Park, that the fishing barge will be an element of it. And as we bring the agreement with Matthews Southwest up there, back for your approval, you'll see that we've got the fishing barge as a prime thing that needs to be included in that development plan. So we are committed to rebuilding it in some fashion and making sure that it's available to residents in the region, and because it is a tourist attraction. It is a unique place, but it needs to be kind of in the vein of what it needs to be safe, but it also needs to be memorable in a good way.